They called the mutt Crow, honoring a dark streak. Slicing down his spine like charcoal across snow, he stayed dead silent unless danger approached. He outlived twin cattle drives, 3 violent shootouts, plus a single harsh Arizona norther that shattered timber like fragile bones. Wade Cridge valued that loyal hound over absolutely every fellow soldier he ever fought beside. 30 miles past the borders of Red Rock County in the New Arizona Territory, a sudden fierce western breeze violently slammed them. Crow's hearing spiked. Sniffing the grit, the beast froze. Exhausted and sun-baked Wade halted right before taking a drink. The hound never changed pace without smelling real trouble. Sprinting past thorny shadows and baked dirt, the animal led. Wade signaled his mare to quickly follow suit. Riding past decaying boundaries, they spotted bone fragments snared in iron and footwear swallowed by the desert floor. This wasteland only bred forsaken souls and things left to permanently decay. The hound paused. Wade dismounted carefully. Footsteps hit quietly against freezing dirt, completely defying the blazing afternoon heat beating down from above. Crow whimpered. Tucked beneath giant rocks, a woman lay partially swallowed by the dirt, as if digging her own grave. Her flesh resembled damp soot, mouth cracked wide and locks violently glued together by dried, crimson stains. That formerly azure gown hung in absolute tatters, ripped apart by relentless desert gales and sharp briars. Wade remained silent. Kneeling close, he hovered his knuckles over her cracked lips, feeling for any escaping air. A frail, dusty exhale brushed his skin. She lived. Meanwhile, the dark mutt settled back, watching intently. Liquid touched her mouth. One gulp triggered a violent, desperate bodily tremor. Gritty air escaped during a weak hack. She struggled to shift positions, but immediately collapsed. Lids twitched without revealing her gaze. He threw her lifeless, heavy frame atop the horse, securing the bindings. Mounting behind her, the drifter steered his steed toward those towering, mountainous ridges seeking an abandoned tracker's cabin concealed by thick timber. A shelter untouched since heavy April downpours destroyed the ceiling. That beat abandoning a helpless soul to hungry desert scavengers. Her mass felt non-existent, a fragile spirit entirely consumed by horrors far heavier than her skeletal frame. The hound bolted, forging a path, as if sensing this mysterious stranger held some profound, undeniable significance. At nightfall, that ruined cabin door groaned on one rusty joint. Placing her upon a decaying bed, he ripped his garment into rough dressings, drowning those deep gashes in harsh liquor. Unconscious, she merely twitched from the fiery, burning pain. Working silently, he scrubbed her legs and extracted deep thorns. Mangled heels accompanied dangerously protruding skeletal bones. Either murderous men tracked her, or she was tossed to wild predators. Resting by the fireplace, he remained hypervigilant, with a loaded repeater across his knees. The dark hound guarded her bedside, tracking every single exhale. 48 hours vanished before those heavy eyelids finally parted. Her irises gleamed a vivid emerald hue, resembling rich vegetation clinging to wet rocks. Staying quiet, she merely stared. The gunslinger held out a fresh canteen. Grabbing the tin, she gulped quietly. "Any idea what territory this is?" he questioned. Her mouth opened slightly. "Negative." He paused, yet no identity was ever offered. Gulping hard, she whispered, clueless. He frowned. Memory entirely wiped? Yep, absolute deceit. Or perhaps truth. Regardless, this hardened cowboy figured out decades ago that deception spun by a bleeding survivor usually demanded close, careful attention. Carrying unique brands, he mumbled. Blinking, she checked for old ink. Twisting her forearm upward, she revealed a peculiar, intentional ring scorched into her flesh, totally unlike cattle iron. His rugged face remained stone, though a sudden heaviness seized his ribs, an ancient, freezing dread. Decades back, that exact scorching had sealed a crumpled parchment bearing his carved initials. Before embracing this quiet frontier life of grazing and revolvers, young Wade Cridge was betrothed to an unseen woman born from a bizarre familial pact originating back east in Missouri. That was Ruth Vexley, child of a bankrupt glass trader overseeing barren soil. Without ever crossing paths, his only glimpses were a tiny painted portrait and that distinct, scorched wax emblem, that unmistakable singed circle, a superstitious warding trick her mother practiced far away from polite society. 24 months passed. She vanished completely, and the wedding fell through. She faded from his memory completely, while this battered stranger recovered in his cabin, silent yet tracking every single shadow. Whenever the hound wandered off hunting varmints, her absence of comfort showed in. Nervous tapping fingertips along the timber bed. Slumber always found her fists locked tight like predator talons. Midnight terrors tore through her, devoid of actual language, just fractured gasps hinting at buried trauma. He held his tongue for now. Sunrise brought a sudden question. Why pull over? The mutt sniffed you out. The beast returned her stare. Why not abandon me? Felt wrong. Bet you have committed your share of sins. He stared right back, fully guilty. Acknowledging this dark truth, she finally found her footing almost a week later. Tossing her a worn flannel and a leather strap, he helped secure her ragged appearance against the gales. Accepting the garments silently she displayed, the humble restraint of a lifelong survivor. "Gotta call you something," he grunted. Staring through dusty glass, she whispered, "Ruth sounds fitting." Unflinching, he merely observed the fierce breeze, pressing tangled strands across her pale jaw. "All right then, Ruth." The hound whimpered into the dead cabin silence. Pivoting toward the animal, she muttered into the empty space dividing her and the frontiersman. "Fate brought me to your doorstep." He offered no reply while the gale howled outside, accompanied by a distant, knowing, avian shriek. 72 hours passed before he discovered her fiercely smashing flints together, trembling with raw aggression, skin peeling from her. Knuckles, her sunken features betrayed a deeply buried, unspoken agony. "Who crossed you?" he pressed. Staring blankly, she rasped, "Left me for the buzzards." He nodded, recognizing the fallout of half-finished frontier hits. It created dangerous ghosts, folks wandering the dirt long past their expiration date. She earned her keep around his homestead, patching shingles, chopping kindling, and tending the kettle. His bloody past remained unquestioned, and he kindly ignored whatever nightmares haunted her waking hours. Yet every evening she would angle that scarred tissue toward the hearth, studying it like a morbid treasure map leading back to hell. Then, one inevitable dark evening, flanking the doorway with the hound, she finally declared, "I'm hunting those bastards down." No explanation was needed. As the dog rumbled a warning, she demanded, "Arm me up." Ever pulled a trigger? Never. He slowly unlocked his heavy weapons chest. That old man's legacy, a Colt Navy. Its steel, dark from years of hard use. He passed the iron over, and her fingers wrapped around the grip like she was born holding it. Right then, the truth hit him hard. This was not random, neither destiny nor divine pity dragged his hound out into that suffocating storm. It was a long-buried vow he had desperately tried to outrun. Now, a bloody payback was calling her name. She took to the firearm with a chilling, silent fury. The kickback never rattled her, and shattering those tin cans brought zero joy to her face. He lined up shattered glass, oxidized cookware, and even pinned a ragged scarecrow limb to a fence. 7 days in, she was hitting every single mark. He kept his mouth shut, only tweaking her stance and whispering to steady her breath right before the hammer dropped. Gratitude was never spoken. Come nightfall, she sat by the kerosene flame scrubbing that, Colt stripping the cylinder and barrel down until the mechanics felt as natural as a heartbeat. Those fingers that used to tremble from starvation turned rock solid, and her posture turned rigid. She laced up Wade's worn-out leather kickers, Oversized, sure, but tough enough for the frontier wrapped in his discarded Texas duster, its heavy collar hugging her chin like steel plating. The hound shadowed her every step. They operated as a unit, patrolling riverbeds and reading the clouds pacing the property edge, as if they knew the devil was galloping their way. He kept shoved halfway under the tumbleweeds, dumped flat on his stomach, limbs spread wide, with a bullet hole straight through the spine, steed missing, vultures hovering above. She dropped to a squat next, to the dead man peeling back his bloodied jacket. A dark shift washed completely over her expression. Digging into the lining, she pulled a dark token engraved with a cross inside a ring the Red Rock Rider's signature. That was a vicious gang he knew by reputation and prayed he would never cross paths with. You could not exactly call them common bandits, but they sure were not military men, just brutal guns for hire, drifting without a country, lacking any scrap of human decency, their only law stamped on that metal. Quiet down for silver, die for gold. Rising to her feet, she muttered, "This is one of their boys. Ring any bells? I will never forget the bastard who sold me to that pack." He locked eyes with her. "Who did it?" "My old man." She delivered it deadpan, zero crying, completely steady. Just cold, brutal honesty. The hound let out a low snarl as the breeze shifted. Pointing their saddles south, they headed straight for Gritstone, a miserable settlement drowning in alkali and death, the gang's last known haunt. Their cabin faded away like an open tomb. That six-shooter now rested on her thigh, hair-bound. Tightly in leather, her frame small but ready for war. Hours drifted by without a single word from her. She just glared out at the harsh frontier. He recognized that hollow stare instantly, the face of a survivor who has completely crossed over into the darkness. Gritstone jutted out of the dirt like a rotting wound. Most of the storefronts were charred ruins. The local watering hole slanted hard to the east, looking ready to collapse entirely. He took the lead, with her trailing behind, dog at their heels. The local lawman was nowhere. Mail station nailed shut. The sole pulse of life flickered at the supply shop low lanterns. A pair of Mustangs hitched, and a young woman pushing a broom looking like a ghost caught between two hells. Stepping inside, a fella in a tailored suit glanced over the flour sacks. She pushed forward and slammed that dark token onto the wood. "Point me to the devil handing these out," she demanded. The card sharp squinted, demanding to know the wager. Offering up her identity gave the stranger pause. Stepping into the light, Wade offered a grim choice regarding the fellow's teeth, which quickly sealed the deal. Gesturing toward the dim rear parlor, the swindler suggested checking the battered plaster for directions. "Look for ash sketches," he muttered. "The hideout sits 3 stops along that obsidian spine of rock. Are these drifters constantly moving because they know someone is hunting them down?" the gunslinger inquired. "Nobody is anticipating a fight," the dealer murmured. "Those folks are simply biding their time out there. Instead of concealing their base, they pitched it in suicidal territory, where that dark crest sliced the earth open. Nothing but vertical drops and treacherous, crumbling gravel. A solitary path snaked inward, guarded by rotting timber and rusted metal debris left by forgotten prospectors. Taking point, the woman drifted up the incline with the eerie calm of a local walking to her front door. The bounty hunter trailed, with his repeater raised, keeping the loyal hound squarely in the middle. Twilight revealed a lookout. She put a bullet right through his skull without a single flinch or second thought. Another guard perished. Silently in his bedroll, via a swift blade to the neck, leaving his weapon for her taking. He kept quiet about her obvious killing experience. Flickering embers eventually guided them to the central bivouac. Half a dozen outlaws huddled near the warmth, ignoring a pair of starved, shackled captives shivering in the dirt. Lurking in the gloom was a damaged supply cart, sporting a fractured rim and deeply soiled fabric coverings. Boldly, she breached the glowing perimeter of the campfire. Startled murmurs erupted as the thugs scrambled to their feet, fumbling desperately for their holsters. Her iron cleared leather instantly. dropping a pair of them into the dust before anyone else could react. Panic scattered the survivors. As one bolted for the cargo, a well-placed slug from the rifleman dropped him cold. Someone scrambled up the boulders, but the vicious dog launched upward, violently shredding the escapee's calf. A lone survivor stumbled into the illumination of the noose, blazing logs, frantically waving his empty palms in surrender. Staring down her barrel, the bleeding captive gasped her name, causing a sudden storm of conflicted anger within her. Seeing the revolver shake in her grip, her companion closed the distance, realizing they shared a dark history. A stiff agreement confirmed it. This bastard claimed abandoning her was a mercy, shifting the captive's expression entirely. The old man brokered that trade, the outlaw sneered, twisting his lips into a sickening defensive grin. That patriarch traded the ranch for a fortune and erased you from the county ledger to the world. You perished. Officially buried a couple of years back, he taunted, right? Before her bullet violently shattered his kneecap. Agonized wails echoed as he fell, cut short when she whispered her survival and put lead through his chest. After unchaining the captives, they consigned the entire settlement to the flames and tossed dirt over the corpses. She held a silent vigil by the smoldering ruins until dawn broke, wearing an utterly blank, haunting expression. The gunslinger held his tongue, fully aware that vengeance might muffle old ghosts without ever truly putting them down. Even so, a newfound looseness in her posture suggested a heavy burden had finally been lifted away. Turning her gaze his way, she stated her absolute resolve to track down the man responsible. A silent gesture of agreement from the mercenary was matched by a sharp, solitary woof from the hound. The property deeds were moved to Silverton, she muttered, naming their next inevitable destination. That town hides the deception. Tossing the gear over his mount, he declared it was time to move out, despite the grueling eastern journey ahead of them. Absolute terror had vanished entirely from her demeanor. The exiled daughter was finally making her brutal return to the homestead. Silverton hovered near, society's frontier, like a sinner faking piety, masking its corruption just to steal a profit. Trains and fancy silk ties defined the place, hiding brutal crimes directly beneath perfectly shined leather footwear. A settlement built on heavily funded hush money where unfortunate problems were, conveniently swallowed by graves near the churchyard. Midnight guided their approach. The drifter secured their steed beneath some broadleaf trees half a mile from the buildings. The woman took the lead, with the quiet canine completely, ditching the protective headwear and proper frontier lady accessories. Let those bastards look her in the eye, the rifleman figured, and let them sweat over how much vengeance she carried. They slipped into town like ghosts. The evening drowned under raucous fiddling and high-stakes card games with piercing laughter echoing from the tavern doors like shattered glass. Yet the watering hole was not her destination. She made a beeline for the magistrate's office, barred shut, naturally. Without missing a beat, she pulled her revolver and blasted the deadbolt to splinters. Her companion simply cocked an eyebrow. "Real quiet," he muttered. Ignoring him, she stepped into a room reeking of damp rot and dried parchment. Plumes of dirt danced in the shadows like restless phantoms. Marching straight to the clerk's table, she forced the cabinets apart, hunting for specific land records. "Got it," she muttered, raising a creased document. The parchment was brittle, yet the ink practically bled. Her father's signature, Jameson Fexley Grandeur. Sold to Matthias Templeton exactly 6 months following her abduction. It bore a wax stamp that made Wade freeze. He knew that crest. An ancient bloodline insignia, supposedly wiped out during the brutal frontier wars. Flipping the parchment revealed cold, unfamiliar handwriting scrawled along the edge. Estate forfeited, heir dead. Her grip tightened on the document until the blood completely drained from her fingers. With a swift, violent tear, she shredded the lie. Slumber was not an option. They spent the dark hours tracing the corrupt breadcrumbs through the settlement. One crooked figure pointed to the next. The vault director, the territory agent, the local preacher. This entire frontier town had hidden their bloody transaction beneath polite grins and holy verses. As the sun peeked over the horizon, her partner had carved two specific targets into his ledger: Templeton and Clive Doran. Wealth and violence working together. The former currently possessed her family's ranch. The latter arranged the theft. He commanded the hired guns who locked desperate girls inside hidden carts and squalid prisons. The nauseating stench of the parlor hit her nose long before the building appeared. Cheap floral water mingled with heavy tobacco, masking a grim reality tucked away from the freezing wind. A child, barely 15 years of age, cracked the entrance. "Fetch Clive for me," the gunslinger demanded. "He is not seeing anybody," the youth whispered back. "Let him know the Vexley girl survived," she countered. Wide-eyed and terrified, the young worker darted back into the shadowed hall. Her partner offered a steadying grip on her arm, but she forcefully shrugged him away. 5 minutes passed before their prey emerged. A towering figure sporting an unsettling grin and pristine leather footwear. He looked her up and down with the calculating gaze of a cattle buyer at an auction. "Well now, the lost heiress," he drawled. "Truly believed you were in the dirt by now." She stood absolutely rigid. "You were supposed to vanish into the wilderness forever," he pressed. "A tragic tragedy for the town, yet highly profitable." "I recognize those knuckles of yours," she interrupted. "That heavy metal signet. The exact hand that swung the iron bars wide while your men abducted me." A dark laugh escaped his lips. "The mind plays tricks on you, sweetheart." A feral snarl erupted from the shadows. The corrupt boss went for his iron, but her ally was quicker, blowing a hole straight through his forearm. His weapon clattered to the floorboards as an agonizing shriek tore from his throat. Closing the distance, she brutally crushed his kneecap with her gun barrel. He crumbled, and she crouched near his face. "You are going to walk me right to the main buyer," she whispered coldly. Right this second. The grand estate loomed past the railway, perched on a hill with towering glass panes. The wealthy baron purchased the absolute greatest vantage point to watch the settlement rot. They hauled the bleeding and forced her up the stone pathway like a fresh carcass from the butcher. A servant unlatched the heavy wood, the color draining from his cheeks. "Announce us," she commanded. Through clenched teeth, the wounded man wheezed. The dead girl returned. Agonizing minutes ticked by until the grand entryway swung completely open. The mastermind himself waited, in rich fabric displaying the exact same wax symbol, pinned right to his lapel. His mane was starkly pale, and his stare held nothing but an empty, chilling void. The man gazed at her, seeing a ghost conjured from forgotten ashes. "Just a kid, then." "Nothing personal," he muttered. "Well, I grew up," she shot back. "Word is you traded her folks' property for blood money," her companion growled. The rich man's gaze flicked over the snarling hound and the leveled iron. "What's done is done." "Exactly," she murmured. "Time to settle the tab." The heavy revolver clicked past the cylinder. He held his ground, chin tilting up in defiant pride. "Should have put you in the dirt myself." Her bullet caught him dead center in the skull. The lackey started wailing until a heavy Winchester stock violently silenced his jaw. Servants scattered like quail chased by a single booming hound's warning. Walking away, they left the grand estate roaring in a fiery blaze. Resting near the settlements, limits under twisted timber, she cradled her weapon, features painted in ash, while her partner guarded the trail. "You are free to ride out," she told him. "Return to your quiet acres." He refused, silently forcing her to finally study the man beside her. "Fate brought you my way. The dog tracked you down, not destiny." Heavy silence stretched between them for hours. As shadows lengthened, they rode toward the northern ridges, seeking untainted soil. Their bloody campaign was just beginning, though the haunting memories faded slightly. The changing season crashed down with violent lightning and relentless downpours, washing out the rocky paths and turning desolate creek beds into rushing torrents of crimson mud. Unfazed by the tempest, the woman rode on as if forged from the rugged earth itself. They took shelter inside a charred, abandoned church, where shattered timber crossbeams lay in the soot. Drifters had already splintered the remaining benches for kindling years back, yet her companion managed to. spark a meager blaze, while the hound nested under the shattered holy table. She examined the scorched podium, brushing surviving etchings, tracing, desperate, please, and family marks scratched by lost pioneers. "Did the Almighty ever mean anything to you?" she questioned softly. Tossing timber into the flames, he answered as a kid. Before seeing the horrors folks justify using scripture. Accepting his grim truth, she whispered, "I begged them." Heavens in that prison camp, right up until my faith vanished. He offered nothing but silence. Staring into the dancing embers, she pressed further. "What about absolute fairness? I trust only in debts paid." Rising up, she declared, "Iron Gulch is our next target." He raised his head sharply. "What's out that way?" That is where they dragged the little one. Getting to his feet cautiously, he asked who. With a slightly shaking exhale, she confessed, "During that initial raid on my family homestead, they grabbed a tiny kid, barely 7 years old, claimed her youth meant higher profits." Her cries only stopped when they gagged her brutal. A cold, sickening knot formed deep in his chest. Holding his gaze, she admitted her darkest sin. "I abandoned her." Their destination lay 5 sunrises toward the northern winds. It was a dead, silver boomtown, once booming, now just a graveyard of sick lungs and desperate souls. Corporate hired guns swarmed the ragged workers 3 to 1. The law held zero power out there, yet she required absolutely no legal authority. Her duster was buttoned. Against the chill, her 6-shooter ready to draw. He kept the repeater concealed in heavy cloth, though his grip hovered dangerously close to the firing mechanism. The beast prowled out front, fur bristling, flashing fangs at any stranger giving them side-eye. Locating a busted shanty past the ruined lumberyard down south, they finally tracked down little Elsie. Barely pushing 11 years of age, she looked starved, harboring a haunted gaze far beyond her tragic youth. Huddled in the dirt, the kid pieced together a rag toy using hands aged far past their years. The moment Ruth breached the threshold, the little one recoiled in pure terror. Kneeling down, the gunslinger kept her movements painfully slow. "I recall your face," the outlaw murmured. "You wore a bright yellow bow." The child stared. "Stolen." Ruth nodded. "I figure. Will you return me to them?" A dark edge caught Ruth's whisper. "Hell no. We are turning this place to ash." Cyrus Hobb ran that miserable excavation operation with an absolute iron fist. While his workers wasted away in squalor, the Baron lounged inside his pristine masonry mansion. He bankrolled the brutal overseers and purchased human lives like cattle. The entire settlement bowed to his corrupt rule. Wade just craved a quick bullet to the tyrant's head. Ruth, however, desired a true reckoning. She vanished into the dark, recruiting desperate souls. She rallied a grizzled labor veteran and located grieving diggers stripped of their female kin. Pouring out cheap liquor, she probed the deep, unspoken wounds those men had buried for decades. As morning broke, their roster held 20 furious volunteers. Come twilight, 20 hardened laborers stood ready, wielding mining tools, blades, and twin long guns. Driven by 10 years of unfulfilled vengeance, they awaited her signal. Ruth set the grim schedule, striking right after midnight, catching the patrol swapping out and the hounds eating. Survival was never guaranteed. She only offered pure, unadulterated justice. A cold fury choked the evening air as the mob crept forward, completely muted and terrifyingly calm. Nothing but haunted souls seeking payment for everything they lost. Wade breached the southern entrance, while Ruth flanked the horse pens alongside Crow. Above them, a desperate father scaled the shingles, clutching raw fuel and an open flame. The initial sentry perished instantly. When the next mercenary fled, they gladly pushed him indoors. Ruth cornered the wealthy, tyrant right, as he scrambled toward his underground vault. Silence hung heavy as she leveled her heavy revolver. He immediately started pleading. "Any idea how long I begged God for this moment?" she hissed. The coward promised riches and properties. The blaze consumed the compound quicker than anyone anticipated. Hellfire leaped across the timber, devouring the structure and its bloody legacy. Ruth emerged alongside Crow. Her gaze was bloodshot, not from the thick ash, but from a profound, purifying release. The crew with the exhausted child. Slump pursuit never came. That horrific enterprise smoldered into absolute ruin. 7 days passed before they camped near a stream. Ruth handed the orphan a scrap of rawhide, showing her how to fashion it into a golden-hued band. Observing quietly from the tree line, Wade kept his distance. He remained totally silent, realizing their bloody crusade had shifted course. Their brutal path no longer revolved solely around payback. The true mission was forging a ruthless frontier where innocents like Elsie would not suffer Ruth's original fate. A brutal, parched season arrived, cracking the earth beneath baking temperatures and angry swarms. Every watering hole evaporated into dust, leaving the surrounding mountains eerily quiet. The trio drifted through that desolate wasteland like wandering phantoms, seeking refuge in rotting stables and forgotten outposts resting beneath timber scarred by unmentioned conflicts. The rescued kid proved remarkably quick-witted. She studied the outlaw breaking down weapons, absorbing Wade's grim, battle-worn diligence as he repaired gear. Through it all, a single tear never fell from her eyes. She held firm even when brutal sickness struck near, the bluffs forcing them into a damp, underground bunker. Ruth pressed damp rags to the kid's fevered forehead, murmuring secrets lost on his ears. The hound guarded that doorway like a ghost steers, swiveling toward some unseen terror lurking outside. Come day 3, little Elsie finally stirred. I dreamt of a winged lady, the kid rasped, only she dove straight into the dirt. Ruth stroked her curls. You are safe. Her partner just walked away. He had dug too many tiny graves and hauled tinier bodies from far, darker hellholes. Yet this specific child was the one she fiercely refused to surrender. By high summer, they hit Hollow Creek, a bleak settlement full of ranchers and tomb makers. Standard charts ignored this ghost town entirely. Its local holy man was a half, blind former crook, hitching folks for meals and digging graves for booze. She demanded his spade. Not to dig graves, but to unearth a chest. 2 miles up yonder, under a dead tree, sat the prize. He recalled hiding it when the conflict ceased. A tight leather sack held a corroded lockpick and an untorn envelope. She cracked the wax open. He simply watched her read in absolute silence. Closing the note, she extended her arm. "My daddy traded me to you," she muttered. He snatched the cursed parchment, tossing it straight into the flames. "Any vow from the scoundrel who auctioned you is worthless," he growled. The hardened survivor stared at her arm, that branding mark flashing stark white against her flesh. "Me neither," she agreed. They secured an eastbound shack in that forgotten valley. The kid took the bed springs while her savior fixed the shingles. She plowed dirt bare, armed a heavy six-shooter wedged in, her waistband acting as a deadly iron deterrent. Peace reigned briefly across their homestead, until a stormy midnight shattered a long drought and the hound snarled fiercely at the threshold. He snatched his repeater. A shadowed stranger lingered outside, drenched to the bone, palms facing heaven. "I carry no iron," the drifter hollered. "Call me Marin from down south." She slid next to her partner, glaring daggers. "State your business. I witnessed the blaze down at Iron Gulch and the vengeance you delivered. Women are vanishing from my settlement. Maybe 2 or 3 souls snatched using those exact same brutal tactics. Figured you folks might be the righteous type to halt that absolute evil." The gunslinger held a terrifying, prolonged silence, piercing his soul, before giving a single nod. "This work carries a price. My pockets are empty." Then shed blood alongside us. The stranger simply agreed. Suddenly, the brutal frontier conflict was far from finished. The battlefield simply shifted borders. 12 months vanished. She abandoned riding, choosing instead to teach the kid to master sparking flint and black powder, spotting deception instantly. She showed her ways to hunt targets and vanish completely without sacrificing her soul. He stalked society's fringes, gathering grim intelligence from grieving wives, ruined veterans, and street kids, recalling sinister shadows perfectly. Hidden messages filled tree cavities alongside clever warning signs built from string and scattered pebbles forming a silent phantom militia born directly from the discarded. Folks dubbed them the Cinder, Stain honoring her scarred arm and mourning what infernos destroyed beyond repair. As twilight hit, the fierce survivor lingered by the tall crops bordering their homestead. The heavens bled crimson against dead winds. Her aging hound rested nearby, his muzzle fully silver. The youngster gathered wild blossoms by the perimeter. Her rescuer gripped the veranda wood, observing them intently. Ever stop to think? She murmured what would actually happen if the grave kept me. So Wade just kept her silence. Nah. She threw a glance backward. Your hesitation meant carrying the weight of the incoming storm. Her gaze drifted to the Badlands. The brutal burden passed to the kid motioning at the innocent stray sporting a bow, backing heavy steel alongside trail-worn, dirt-caked leather. A ghostly prairie breeze whispered by. Ruth gave a silent signal, and Crow instinctively shadowed her. Wade slowly descended the wooden look of a survivor who walked through fire and escaped. This rugged territory remained unforgiving, yet weary. Ruth deliberately forged her own final chapter, leaving the blood-stained past firmly behind. In the quiet evenings that followed, the family gathered under starlit skies, sharing stories of the old trails and the unbreakable pioneer spirit that turned hardship into hope. Wade, for the first time in years, and felt the weight of old debts finally paid in full. The American West demanded justice, but it also offered redemption for those strong enough to claim it.